Hey everybody, welcome. It's Jackie from the Studio for Art and Craft in Cobleskill, New York. And we are getting ourselves ready to do our first two-plate dot mandala project. This one I call Who Wants Cake? And we have this top plate. This is the one for the top cake. And then we also have a second plate that we'll do that sits on the bottom, okay? And then we have a stand that'll go on there. And this plate goes on top of that. I'm going to show you the whole setup at the end so I don't mess up my camera, because it takes me forever to even just get it this decently done. So you guys have your plate that's marked, and your plate is marked like this one, okay, other than the wet spot in the middle. That's special for me because I've already put some paint where I didn't want it, so I took it off. So anyway, you've got, your lines are etched. I did mine in the bright orange washable marker that will fire off in the kiln, but that way you can see it better on the camera. And then you have your 8-point tool with this dot, number 1 being the smallest tip and going all the way around to number 8, which is the largest tip. You have a wet paper towel so that after you dip and dot, you can clean off your tip. And you've got your pod of paints, which are probably open. You also are working on a placemat, which when you are moving, now I'm on a turntable, so that's a big advantage for me. Sorry about that. But when you are need to turn your plate, you can do it. You can obviously pick up your plate and move it. I think it's always safest, though, to pick it up by the paper placemat and turn that. The less your hands are on your plate, the better, because your hands have oils on them. Glaze does not like hand oil. Doesn't like any kind of oil, to be honest. All right, so we're going to do the top plate first, and we're going to work our way from the middle out. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our red color, and we're going to make the tip with our number 8 tip. So the biggest tip, we're going to put it in that red, and we're going to put a nice big red dot right on the middle. Now, one of the things to remember about really any kind of painting is you can always add more, you can't add less. So if you're tentative or you're new at this, you can start with, smaller, but if you want this dot to be a pretty good size. And then you can always, what you want to do is if you're going to go on it again, don't wiggle it around thinking that's how you're going to make your dot bigger. Just go in the middle and tap, tap, tap so that it retains its round shape. And now we're going to use the same, what I'm going to have you do actually is we're going to go with tip number, I'm going to use, I want to do this. I know, I'm so crazy. I get really crazy, right? We're going to go with a dark blue color and tip number 3, okay? And we're going to put 1 dot at the end of each of these rays. So I don't care if you do it before the ray starts, or on the ray, as long as you do them all the same. And the other thing to keep in mind is to control that your dots are the same size, you can do that with 2 different ways, right? One is how much you dip it, and the other one is how long you hold it on your plate. So the longer I hold it, the more paint drips off of it. It's really pretty basic. So if you feel like you didn't get as much paint on one time when you dipped it, just hold it a little bit longer. And then, here, I'm just going to come down here. All right, so now I've got a blue dot at the base of each of my rays. And then I'm going to go down to tip number 2. I'm going to go back to that red, and I'm going to do what I call triangulate. And by that I mean, you see this blue dot and you see this blue dot? Well, I'm going to put a dot here between them so that it makes a little triangle. Going for a pen so I can point that out. So here we have a triangle. Boom, boom, boom. All right, this is the tip. I hope that makes sense to you. Looks like a triangle if you squint. So I'm going to do that for all of them. So here's 2, and I'm going to put 1 in between, kind of keep it the same height. All right, we're just going to triangulate inside between those blues we've put on. just to add a little bit more color. Okay? Cool. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to triangulate the other way using the same color, the dark red. And we're just going to put, so we're going to use tip number 5. I always like to make sure, double check myself. That's why I take notes. And we're going to triangulate outside. So we're going to put a dot up here, a nice number 5 dot above okay. There we go. And then to finish off our inside structure, we're also going to use tip number 5 and that dark blue color and triangulate again. And this triangle is going to be on your ray. So make sure yes, I agree with myself. So we're going to come up a little bit here, and we're going to put one just above those 2 reds on the line. On the line can really be helpful sometimes. And then I'm going to clean my tip. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're actually going to go bigger. This is a go big or go home moment. And we're going to put one more large dot. We're going to use the tip number 7. Actually, we're not. We're going to do this one. We're going to go around this one. All right, I'm changing my mind. We're going to use tip number 1, and we're going to use our light blue, and we're going to go around this. Now, this is, before I told you we're doing, dip and dot. Now we're going to do what I amazingly call dip, dot, dot, dot. I know. You heard it here first. Just make sure we have enough light on here for you guys so you can really see that. So basically what I do is I use my number 1 tip. I start on the outside on the line and put 1 dot there, and then I'm going to go around the side. 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't get a dot there because I ran out. That's okay. I'm going to dip again, and then I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and now I'll do my 4th one there. So let me show you again what I mean. I'm starting by putting 1 out on the outside, and then 1, 2, 3. If I have enough, I'll put 1 down there. And then here, keep in mind, you want to dot lightly when you start on your second side, because you don't want that dot, even it's the same to be this big, you want it to be as big as your second dot over here. And one way you can control that is by dotting lightly. You can always add more, right? You can't add less. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then come on the other side, 1, nice and light, because I can always make it darker if I need to. Okay, 1. Now you 2, 3. 1, 2. I know, checking my. Now you may or may not have the same number of dots around that I do. Some people dot heavier or lighter. So don't focus on the fact that I have, a top, a bottom, and 3 in between. If you're a light dotter, you should have more. It's more important that your circle looks like a circle than it has the same number of dots as mine. Okay, I don't care how many dots. If you're a light, tiny, you make tiny little dots and you only have this many, it's not going to look round. And that's bad. That's not the look we're going for. So that's basically what we're going to do at this step, is to go around with those dots. All right, we're kind of getting ready to start our first row of petals, if you will. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start to turn that round a little bit more into a teardrop. We're going to go up to tip number 2, and we're going to use the pink color. And here's what you want to do to make it a little bit more pointy, if you like pointy. So you can keep going round, by the way. There's no rule against round. But if you want to start to make it a little more pointy, what I do is I come up a little bit, not noticeably, but then when I come around the sides, I don't go wide. I go very narrow. I stay as close to those dots as I can get. Okay? And now I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to come in and go as close to those dots as I can get. Now, what happens if I run out? Then I'm going to actually use my tip number 1 with a tiny bit just to grab a little paint for the bottom. Okay? Now, can you notice, can you see the difference between the blue, which was more circular? Look at how round these blues are. Get my thing out of the way, my tool out of the way so you can see that. Look how round this is and how pointed this is. So the pointed is achieved by dipping it and just coming up, you know, not high, just not really close to that blue, and then doing the rest of them nice and snug, right in close. Now in this case, you can see I'm coming up to the blue, so I'm not going to have a center dot on that one. It doesn't matter if they all aren't exactly the same. What really matters is that you do not dot on over an already existing dot. That's called a mess. So don't do that. So just go ahead and come up to the top with your tip number 2 and your pink, and then on your around the sides ones, come in nice and snug. All right, and then repeat over here. All right, and that's what we're going to do all the way around. Now, one of the questions that often comes up at this point, oops, see, I'm running even into my red, so I'm just going to ignore it. Just go around it. Can't go through it. Got to go around it. Is what happens if you have dots that run into each other. The answer is leave them alone, okay? It is much easier, hold on really light here, much easier to clean up the paint or the glaze once it's dried than it is while it's wet. If we do it now while it's wet, it's going to smear like crazy, and then it's almost impossible not to see that smear in your final plate. So we're going to not smear. We're just going to let it dry, and then I'll show you how to clean it up. So we just did the pink for our next row. Now we're going to do the same thing with the red. And what you're going to see that happens now, we're going to go up to tip number 3 and use the dark red and basically do the same thing. And what I want to show you on this one is twofold. Okay, one you could, I'm actually going to come over here and do this one next. So when I come down here, the point is these two are going to come together. See how that bottom one is the bottom, whatever the opposite of apex is. Apex is high. I don't know what an opposite is. So I'm going to come down here, knowing that my last dot is kind of in the middle there, because it's also going to be the last dot for over here. I'm hoping that makes sense to you. There you are. See what I'm talking about? Now, I'm happen to be using tip 3 on both sides. A lot of times what I'll do is, I'm coming up here, I'm going to use tip 3 to come down to here. But then on the other side, I don't need a big fat top dot here. So sometimes I will switch over to tip number 2 to come down the other side, because then that dot is going to be the same size as the one over here. Okay, can you guys see that? Okay, I'm checking. Yeah, you can see it. Well, hopefully you can. So I start with 3 when I'm doing the top dot and coming all the way around the sides. But then when I'm doing the second side, I switch over to tip number 2. Just a little trick there. I know, I'm full of tricks. That's what I'm told. Now, if you felt like your little dot at the bottom there isn't dark enough, you just pick up a little more paint on your tip 2 and fix it. No problem. Okay? And that's your next row. We're going to do the same thing, except we're going to go back to, we're going to go up to tip 4 and go back to our dark blue for our last row on this particular part of the design. So again, same thing. We're going to go to the top, a little bit high, and then come in nice and snug. Tip 4, things start to get serious. So I always switch to tip number 3 when I'm going down the other side, because tip 4 would just give me too much paint. So I start with tip 4 for my big dot, and what that'll mean is that by the time I get to the second dot, it should be about the same size as if I started with tip 3, which is what I did here. So you can see it makes it more even. So tip 4, dot, 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 tip 3, dot, 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 dot. Now this one is an extra dot because I'm putting in the middle, which I didn't do on the other side. 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? And also, I'll also tell you, and I say this all the time, it also doesn't matter if both of your sides don't also have the same exact number of dots. You know, sometimes you'll just happen to get bigger dots, or, you know, your hand isn't perfect and it won't be spaced exactly the same. No big, it's okay. Trust me, when you get the whole effect of the whole plate, that will not be noticeable. All right, so my last one with jumping down to tip 3 gives me my last side. So now I'm going to clean off both my tip 4 and my tip 3, because we have finished that part. All right, so we're going to do 2 things now. Well, no, we're going to do 1 thing, and then we're going to do a second thing. So we're going to go to tip number 8, our big tip again, and we're going to go into the pink, and we're going to put 1 dot on the ray above that blue, the apex, my new favorite word, apex. Apex might be beating out viscosity. Viscosity means the thickness of the glaze or any liquid, but anyway, I'm going to put 1 dot up there. Okay, I'm going to do that on each one of these. All right, this dot isn't, we're not going around it. We're not going over, you know, we're going to go around it later, but we're just putting that dot there for now. Okay? And now what we're going to do with the same color, but with tip number 6, is we're going to make what I call a diamond pattern in between each petal. And this is how I do that. So I'm going to want this diamond. It really doesn't matter if your diamond is sort of square or more rectangular. It's just that whatever you do the first time is what you're going to try to repeat. So I'm going to take my 6 and that pink, and I'm going to put a dot down here, and I'm going to put 1 up here. You really can't get more than 2 dots. Here's what I do off of 1 dip on this one, because there'll be 2 different sides. So I might do this and then come out here. If I make it wide, then it'll be maybe more noticeable. All right, they don't have to be exactly the same size, but they should be sort of the same size. So sometimes I'll just put a little bit on the first one because that one is so loaded up with glaze, and then I just touch it so that I don't get too much, and then I hold the second, so this one is very light touch, and then this one I hold down for more glaze to drip. So we're making this sort of what I call a diamond. Hopefully you can see my diamondness in it. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. All right. All right, and this will be my last one of this. Boom, boom. All right. Actually, I just realized I need to make sure if there's any questions or anything going on. I think my comments are on. That's for me to write a comment. That's not important. All right. Hopefully if you have a question, you're posting a comment. It's showing up here. But I'm not seeing anything, so I'm assuming that we're doing just fine. All right, so we just did our diamonds. And now what we're going to do is that single one, remember this one on the ray, oops, don't move it. Remember the one on the ray that we did? We're going to go around that. We're going to go around that a bunch of times. So we're going to start by using tip number 1 and the light blue. Sound familiar? And we're going to go around there just like we did before. 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember, the only thing I care about is that you don't run into something else. So in this case, it's not so desperate that I put 1 more dot in there. I'd rather not, and not run into it. This color is has a much more flowy kind of viscosity. So, especially because I'm really dipping it in. So my dots are a little bigger than they might normally be. And there was an example of one where it didn't have the exact same number on both sides, and that's okay. What you want is you want it to look like it's a circle of dots going around the big dots. That's the most important thing, because that's what's going to capture your eye when you're looking at the finished plate. So that's our first color. We're going to go up to tip 2 and go to our pink. All right. And I'm doing the same thing I did before, which is I'm going up a little bit higher and then I'm coming in snug. Now, sometimes you run out of paint, when on the first one especially. So if I switch down to the number 1, I usually will tap out right about here to make sure that I'm in line. But 2 and 1, there's not as noticeable a difference in the size. So I'm going to use the 2 on both sides. But sometimes when you start with tip 2 up here, and then you have to come all the way around, you might run out of paint. So then I'm going to finish this one, I'm going to use tip 1. And I'll usually start with the last one so that I know I've got some equality of size there. Okay. So nice and snug. Dot, dot, dot. Okay. And last one of this, which really doesn't mean much because we have many, many more to go. That's my last number 2 tip pink. Then I'm going to do number 3 tip. Just looking for questions. Nope, we're fine. Number 3 tip, and we're going to do the dark red. Now this one I feel like I'm going to run out, so I'm going to go ahead and then go down. Since I'm so far down, I'm actually going to go down to number 1. Pick up these, which we're losing a little, so I get them a little darker. Poke that one in my wrong color. How me of me. And then for the other side, I'm going to use number 2 when I start up here. So I started with number 3, but then I switched to number 2 for the other side. So again, I start with number 3, and I come all the way around here, and if I start to run out of gas, in this case glaze, I made that one, then I would go to my number 1 to finish it off. And then I'm just going to take my tip 2 all the way around the side. So start with tip 3 at the top. 1, 2, this one had a lot of juice in it. And then I'm going to switch over to number 2 and come down over here. And I also want a lot of juice in it so it matches. A lot of times you think, oh no, this one's a little bit different than the petal I just did, but it really doesn't. Once it gets fired, it's one of the reasons I think these look so good on the ceramics, because when it fires, it kind of equals out. So what really matters is you want to try to keep each petal looking pulled together rather than worrying about comparing one to the one, before it. Okay. One of the nice things about if you're watching this after versus doing it with me live is you can pause at any point because and then just get all caught up, Pause me if you must now to get yourselves caught up, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we just did the red. We're actually going to come back and do, we just did the pink and then the red. And we're going to do pink again with tip number 4. And then we're going to do red again, also with tip number 4. So we're going to do tip number 4 twice. So here's tip number 4 with the pink. And now in this case, we're not going to, you're not going to go as far down. Use a sentence here. I'm actually going to switch over to tip 3 for the other side, like I said I wanted to do, right? So that you're not going to be able to go to the inside of your diamond. So don't worry about it. Just stop at the diamond. So here's what I'm saying. Tip 4 with the pink coming all the way around. Oh, this one's going to be able to fit in. So this is a bad one to use as an example. And then tip 3, I'm going to come all the way around. Well, on this side, I'm going to hit my diamond if I go too much further. So I'm just going to stop. This is another good example. I start with tip 4. And I'm just going to stop here. And then take tip 3 and come down the other side. And if it looks like I'm running out of gas, I'm going to drop down to tip 2, come hit this one again, and continue on my way. On my merry, merry way. So tip 4 up here. 1, 2. And then switch to tip 3 for the other side. A lot more dots when you get out this far. So different to do the dotting, in the center than it is to do it this far out. Okay. This will be our last one for the pink. And now we're going to do the same thing with the red. So I'm going to still use tip 4, and I'm going to go out on the red. Do another row of red of my teardrop. And because I ran out of gas here halfway down, I'm going to go way down to tip number 2, redot this one, and continue on my way. Sometimes if you don't go back up, whoops, I don't want to use tip 4 for this one, and you want to start with tip 3 for my second side. If you start to run out of gas and you don't go back and grab like an early redot, you can end up with too much. You really have no idea what's on your tip until you put it on the plate. So I'd rather you just go back and use a little bit up by redotting. So that way your dots are more uniform. What I care about really is that they're descending. So see how I ran out of gas there? So I'm going to go back and put a little on tip 2. I'm not going to just start with the new dot. I'm going to come back and add a little bit to this one so I kind of get a running start at it. And they're more even. Well, more uniform in terms of their descendingness. I don't know. I make up the terms as I go. Okay. I can almost see the screen above me. It's like at nose level, so I kind of have to, when I take a break, I kind of look up and see if there's any comments. But you guys seem to be doing just fine. Either that or I've like mesmerized you into a sleepy state, in which case I've now solved the insomnia problem. So that could be good too. There's probably more money in that than there is in dotting. All right, and this is my last one of this color. So this is kind of cool, right? Because now you can start to get a sense of how this design is building. I know, try to ignore the orange lines. They just make you crazy. And then the last thing that we put on this layer is also the blue. So we're going to go with tip 5 and the dark blue. And now it's kind of cool because you can sort of see that I'm just about at the end with all of these, and that's good. It helps you know that you're kind of even. So we're going to do tip 5. And we're going to come, and then for tip 5, we're going to, oops, let me make sure I'm still on. Yeah, you can see that. All right, so I ran out, so I'm going to come back with tip 4 there to make sure, and I'm going really lightly because I don't want to have too big of dots. And I'm planning for my last dot, instead of coming in, pointing time, instead of coming in, I'm coming to the middle because I want this dot to also be the last dot over here. Okay, so if I come over here, I want it to come together. Let me just go and clean those up a little so you can see them a little bit better. Okay, does that make sense? So you're not so much at the very end going down the side as you are coming together. So I'm using, if I did tip 5 on the other side, I'm using tip 4 on this side. But I still want that last one to be one that is the last for both. Ooh, that was interesting. I got some red in there. That's a cute dot. I've never done a half and half dot. But again, I'm going to leave that for now. I'm going to practice what I preach. I know, it's hard to believe. And I'm going to come down this side. I'll come clean that up later. Because right now, if I tried to clean that up, it would just smear all over the place. And I would, it's like that Dr. Seuss story where is that the Cat in the Hat or the Cat in the Hat comes back? I can never remember. But it's the one where all the color ends up all over the walls. And every time they wipe it up, it gets all over whatever it is they wipe it up with or whatever else they have in their hands. And that's what can happen if you try to clean up wet glaze. It's a very similar situation. So we're just going to let it go. Okay, that's another. I'm like filled with kids' musical stuff today. Just let it go and just come back to it later. So I stay close in, except at the end I'm going to go toward the center instead of remaining close in. We don't have too many more bits on this plate, so it's okay that we're approaching the outside. Now, everybody, I know I say this over and over, everybody dots differently. I did a program this past Sunday at a local winery outdoors. It was so lovely. And it was a design on a middle of a platter. It was Bloomin' Beauty. And it was, you know, when I do Bloomin' Beauty, it basically takes up the whole platter. But some people just naturally dot tighter than I do. And so their design like took up maybe 2/3 of the platter. And then we had fun at the end looking at where their empty spaces are and thinking about what we could do to fill those empty spaces. So I thought that was pretty fun. I enjoyed that quite a bit. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to only dot down one side of these petals. So we're going to use tip 6, and we're going to use the same dark blue color, okay? But what you're going to do is you're going to start up, it's going to start exactly the same way. And I want these to be nice big dots. These are going to be bold little babies. All right, and that's all you're going to do on that petal. We're going to turn it now and go to the next petal. We're not going to do anything on the other side. Now, it's hard for me to use words like left and right because what looks left or right for me isn't always the same. Remember, I'm coming back here because I just said I want them to be bold, so I went down to number 3 and added more. Whatever side you're dotting down, you want to stay on that side. So for me, I hope these look, are they on the right for you? Yeah, they're on, I think they're on the right for you also. So I'm dotting down the right, and that's what you're going to do. Every single one is going to be down the right. Now I ran out of steam, so I'm going to pop down to that on tip number 6. So I'm going to, did I say tip number 6? Yes. So I'm going to pop down to tip number 3 and add just a tiny bit here and a tiny bit here and finish that off. Okay, so I'm going to come up to tip number 6, start up here. Now this time I got a lot better of a dip, so I'm not going to run out of steam, I can tell already. All right, so we're only doing one side. See, that one did not have a lot of steam. Steam, it's a very technical painting term. Ugh, running out of steam. Okay, so I'm going to go down to tip 3, and I'm just going to add a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. And that way I keep them all looking in descending order. And then the last one in this color. Okay, I'm going to clean my tips because now I'm going to do the same thing with the same tip size. So starting with tip 6 with the light blue. So I'm going to come, now if you're at the part of the plate now where it's starting to come up like I am, what I'll often do is pick my plate up a little bit so that when I do my first dot here, I am parallel to the table so my dot doesn't run. Okay, it does not take very long for this to set up enough so I don't have to stress out about it. I can see I'm running out of steam already. This one's a very flowy viscosity, so I don't want this one dot. It's too small, so I'm coming back and adding a little more glaze to it, okay? It's already pretty safe. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to tilt my plate, I'm going to put my first dot there, and then I'm going to continue down, just holding the plate up so that that first dot has a chance to set. And because I'm going to run out, which normally would happen at this stage because this is a lot of paint, I just redip with tip number 3 to finish that off. All right, I think that makes sense to you. So I'm starting with tip number 6. I'm putting my dot here, and then I'm coming all the way around, and I'm tilting my plate up. But I'm running out of gas pretty quick, so I'm going to go grab number 3 and continue on. I'm going to come up to this one and continue on my way. Now, what happens if you run out of steam again? No big deal. You just go down to tip number 2. Okay, I'll just do that so I can show you. Just keep it, you know, you can add, as long as you don't try to change the shape of the dot, as long as you just come back and dot in the middle, you should not go wrong. The biggest place I see people going wrong is when they try to fix the shape of a dot by turning the tool or kind of rocking it back and forth. Ugh, that does not work, trust me. Ask me how I know, right? Of course I know, because I've tried it all, and I'm here to keep you from my bad fate. So don't rock it, just dip and dot. Just dip and dot. And if you need to, just put a little bit more right in the center. It will form a circle itself. And even if it's not right away where you can see it, it will in the kiln. Oops, hold it up so it stays, so it's parallel to the table. And come back with tip number 3 and go back, finish it off. Okay, so that's what we've got for the one last step on this plate is I've got this number 8 with the dark red dot in between. Now, I have mine aligned, sorry, probably put my hand right in the middle of that. I have mine aligned right, as I like to say, right about here with, use time for a pointer before I go doing this. Okay, I'm running out of hands here. Okay, I have mine aligned at this height, so I'm putting mine in the middle at the same height as this. It doesn't matter what height you put it at as long as you try to keep it consistent. So I'm going to put one here, partially because I want to kind of do it before the plate starts to turn up so I don't have to worry so much about running. Now I am still holding my plate at an angle. And I'm going to wait for a second, let some of that dry before I finish this up. Just to be safe. All right. So now I feel like those are drying. And this is our top plate of our Who Wants Cake design. Done and done. So you guys want to take a break, you can pause me, you can finish up this plate. And when you do, then you can put it aside to dry. And we are going to move on then to the bottom plate. Okay, so let me make sure that you can see something on there. It is. Let me get it. Now there's no design in the middle of this plate. It's just on the edges because you wouldn't see anything in the middle. And what I've got is it's 2 different designs, but I also play a little bit with the colors. So that's what we're going to walk through together next. All right, oops, not with the plate that's already painted. So I've got that one marked. This one just has dots on these dots are about 1.5 inches. Let me see if you can see it. There you go. These dots are about 1.5 inches from the edge. okay? And they align with with the 6 rays that were on your other plate, plus then one in between. So you don't need to know that. I just like to tell you all of this minutia because it's stuff I know. So what we're going to do is, if you pick one of your dots to be like dot, we'll call this one dot 1, okay? So we're going to use the size 8 tip and the red, and we're going to put a red dot on tip number 1. And then we have 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to come down to tip number 5. 6, 7, 8, 9. That's it. We're only putting 3 of these on here. Okay? And then we're going to clean it off, and we're going to come back with the dark blue, and we're going to put dark blue on 1, 2, on 3. 4, 5, 6, 7. It's every other, okay? 8, 9, 10, and then 11. So we're gonna leave one dot in between each of these. So you should have red dot, blue dot, red dot, blue dot, red dot, blue dot, back to red. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, this is a fun design. Oh my gosh, I spent so much time perfecting this design because I just think it's a ton of fun. So we're going to do all of the, we're going to go around all of these and put in 4, using tip number 5, we're going to put 4 size 5 dots, at 12, like north, south, east, and west. So what do I mean by that? So we're going to use the light blue with tip number 5, okay? And I'm going to put 1 on this side, 1 at the bottom, 1 on the right, and 1 on the left. I'm going to use the light blue for all of them. So we're going to actually just do them all. So I'm going to do 1 at the top, 1 on the inside, 1 on the outside, 1 on the side, 1 on the other side. Not to get too technical. I usually pause a little bit just to make sure that I'm pointing toward the center on the first one. So here's what I mean. I just want to make sure I'm pointing across the, that it's going toward the center. The spacing on these both matters and can be fudged around, but let's try to keep them pretty straight if you can. It makes it, this is part of the design for those, what do I want to call it? I don't know what to call them. I don't have a name for them. The waves. I don't know. I just love this design. Like I said, it took me a long time to figure out how to do it repeatedly. Like I could do almost anything once, but then figuring out how do you get it to happen again is a little bit tougher. All right, so now we're going to work on the blue dot. Pick a blue dot, meaning a dot that's got a blue center, okay? And we're going to start with tip number 1, and we're going to use our red, and we're going to dot, dot, dot about 2/3 of the way around from here up to here. Now here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're not sure what 2/3 is, it is better to end sooner than later for this one, okay? Because you don't want to go too far around because we're going to need this space over here later. So I'm going to go into tip 1, and this is what I mean. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to go dot, 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 and I'm going to stop here. Okay, if I turned out that I didn't need to stop there, bully for me, I can come back and fix that. So now I'm going to do that around each of, I have to say things really slowly to make sure I say them intelligently. We're going to do that, let me just finish this one so I can just show you the whole thing, what it looks like. All right, so now we're going to take the same tip number 1 with the dark blue. make sure you can see that's, oh geez, I'm so sorry. It's not even on the camera. My goodness. So now I'm going to redo this and show you. So we had the blue center and the 4 blue around it. And then we did the red. And now I'm going to take the dark blue with the same tip number 1. And this will still start right here next to it. And we're going to do the same exact thing and go around, and you want it to end basically at about the same place. Now this you could actually see. Hey Liz, hey Natasha, how are you guys? And now the third one on here, okay, it's also still tip number 1, okay? You're just going to do that in the light blue, and you're going to start from up here and come to the same ending place. And here's why that matters as we move on to the next dot. I'm going to go this way, and I'm going to start with my 1 and the red and come around this. Oh, make sure you can see it. This is a huge plate. It definitely comes off the screen. Let me see. Okay, there it is. I've got it on the screen. Okay, so my hand will be a little bit in the way. I apologize, but this is a really big plate. So what I'm doing is I'm just using tip 1, and I'm going dot, 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 and coming around. Then I'm going to use tip 1 again with the dark blue. I'm going to sneak that first one in there right next to it, and I'm going to do it parallel to that one, and I'm going to end at the same spot. And then I'm going to do it with the blue. And the reason why it was important to stop about 2/3 of the way is this exact reason, right? Because you need this one to fit. If you go too far, this is going to run into this. Made my point. Woot, woot. Okay, so I'm going to finish this one around so you can see how the whole design comes together. All right, so we're going to do 1. I've never done these upside down before, so be patient with me. I'm going to stop there. Because here's the point. If I wanted to, I could come back here with a tiny bit of, with tip number 1 and a tiny bit, and I could add another one here to all of them. I can make it longer. Just like you can always add more, you can't add less. You can always make things longer. You can't make them shorter. So now I'm going to come in over here, and I'm going to add my dark blue and have it end about the same place. Clean my tip, and then I'm going to do my light blue, which comes off of the big light blue dot. There we are. Are you starting to see how this cool design comes together? I love, love, love this. As you can tell. All right, so, whoops, I didn't get enough on there. So I'm going to come around my last blue. Now this one I can kind of know where I have to be because the line is already, it's already there. So I'm just going to, there's no mystery. And now the light blue, and you'll get to see the whole thing. And that's how that puppy looks. I just love these. I know I'm wacky. I get it. So the only difference between, so I would then do all the ones with the blue in the middle first using the same color pattern. It's all tip number 1, so there's not a lot to remember. There's nothing different other than the colors. So for the red dots, we'll do a red dot together so that you know what the color family is for that. We're going to change the order, so we're going to actually start with the dark blue first, okay? Instead of starting with the red, we start with the dark blue. And then I'm going to go to the dark red. And then I still end with the light blue. So I really just changed the order of the dark red, of the red, and the, gotta clean my tip. The red and the blue. And then we end with still with the light blue coming out of the light blue. Oh, that one is, I gotta clean this tip. I am not happy with this. So again, this one I can go clean up after it dries. I can't do too much with it right now, It's wet, but I'll clean it later. All right, so just to repeat that one, I'm going to do, whoops, make sure you can see that. Okay, so I'm going to do the light blue first. 1, 2. Then I'm going to do the red. Needs a little bit more juice. And then I'm going to do the light blue. All right, so blue. The advantage, I guess, of doing it in this order is that I'm coming into the light blue that I just did so that I can see where I need to end by. I think that was a sentence. I'm pretty sure. I feel almost sure. So that's kind of an advantage of doing it in this direction. I really never did it in this direction before. And then we have the last one. Whoa, I'm probably off the thing now, aren't I? Look at me remembering to stay on camera. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the red. The main thing to remember is that you want them to fade away at the end, and you always kind of want to end at the same point. Okay, so that's what that color looks like. So we've got an example here of both colors. The only thing we do is switch the inside color. And then the last thing I do, you can finish up all the other ones. I know watching me paint is about as good a time as one can have, but alas, don't want to bore the heck out of you. So in between each one, let me do the one, sorry, I'm going to twirl, whee, not to make you dizzy. So in between, what I do is just take my number 8 tip and the pink, remember the pink that we've not been using, and I just put that right there on the remaining dots. That's the finishing of this plate, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to risk, I'm going to take the big risk of moving my camera to be able to show you what the whole thing looks like put together. So this is the bottom plate. I'm going to actually take my camera out, my phone out, so that, and lift it up. So that's what the total of that plate looks like. I got so many lights here, my goodness. All right, let's see. All right, then I've got, where's my, there it is. I need a different hand. All right, sorry, rude. Okay, so that was the bottom plate. This is the cake stand that goes in between if you do both plates. And then this is the top plate. All right, and so this is what it looks like all put together. Yay! All right, so thank you so much. This is on once I save this video, it'll be on Facebook it'll be on our Facebook page, and it'll also be on our YouTube channel, and you can access it. Like if you decide you want to do this plate, you can just order the kit, and then the link to this video will be right where you order from. So super easy. Thanks so much for joining. I will see you guys again soon. Bye.